All right. Well, good afternoon to everybody out there today. I'm going to get started with just a little bit of housekeeping before we dive into the webinar, and then I'll introduce myself and my co-host today. But to start off, two things that we just want to go over real quick. First, we want today's webinar to be really interactive. Use the questions pane on the right-hand side on your little GoToWebinar interface there. If you have any questions at all that you'd like for Trey or myself to get to at the end of the webinar, I'll try to remind everybody a couple times throughout the webinar about that. But just at any point you have questions, go ahead and ask them. If we don't get to your questions today during the webinar, we will make sure to get back to you after the fact. The other thing is that we will send out the full recording of this webinar to everybody that registered, so don't worry, that's going to be in your inboxes tomorrow. With that, let me introduce myself and my co-host. My name is Gabe Cohen. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing here at GuideStar. I lead a team that's responsible for telling GuideStar's story, advancing its mission, and increasing adoption of its programs and products. My co-host today is Trey Mascola. He's an account executive at CrowdRise. He specializes in matching charities with the right platform features to fit their needs. He's passionate about nonprofits that run youth programming, and he's also apparently the best juggler at CrowdRise. They had a contest apparently to prove this, and I think I want to work at CrowdRise now. But Trey, welcome.
Thank you. And just to be clear, it was a coast to coast, so it involved our LA office and our Detroit office. But yeah, it was a happy time for me.
No, that's really good. I was questioning the veracity of your claim when you said that, but that's good. I'm calling in from DC today. Trey's calling in from Detroit. For anybody else that's on the East Coast today, I don't know why you're here. I really appreciate it, but it's like 80 degrees and sunny here in DC right now. So thank you for joining us, or if you're listening to the recording after the fact, that's probably better considering how nice it is outside. Here's some of what we're going to cover today, a little bit of an agenda, if you will. We're going to talk a bit about streamlining processes, maximizing your impact, diversifying your fundraising portfolio. You know, I think with some of the tax changes that have happened over the last year, all nonprofits out there are really concerned about making sure that they can maximize their impact. And in particular, as it comes to that fundraising component. We're going to look at ways that you can amplify your digital presence, and then some kind of tools and resources that you can use to increase your return on efforts. When we think about thematically what we're talking about today, we're really trying to focus on what were the things in 2017 that were effective for you in your role at your organization, and then also for your organization overall. As fundraisers, as communicators, as marketers, as people that want to do better and work at nonprofits, we have limited bandwidth, we have limited resources, so we always need to think about what are the things that make the most impact, that we're doing throughout our daily work lives, if you will, that are making the most impact. And when we started to talk with our friends over at CrowdRise about this webinar, the idea of the Pareto principle came into mind for me. And we've all probably heard this before, but it's this idea that 80% of what you do leads to 20% of your results, but then there's 20% of what you do that leads to 80% of your results. And it's the bottom section of these two little graphs that we want to focus on today. We want to try to help you think about and dive into, reflect upon that 20% of activities that lead to 80% of results. And so let's think about how you can start to dive into that. The first thing is that you need to give yourself the flexibility to let go of things that aren't working. A good way that I like to think about this is when you took over your position, what were the things that were assigned to you that your predecessor said, here's the 6 things that you need to do every month. What are the things that you're still doing because they told you to do them, but that you actually haven't seen any impact from? That's a great way to start. With that, then you want to look for the things that you're doing, either, you know, maybe your predecessor gave them to you, maybe they didn't, that are really working and that you're seeing success and that you're able to evaluate an ROI, and you want to double down in those places. Modify and make improvements where you can is the next thing that we're going to think about here. And then, you know, don't blow everything up just because it's a new year, right? Think about things that you can reuse, that you can recycle, that are going to give you pretty good bang for your buck, but that you're not going to need to start from scratch on. And then always be testing, right? As marketers, as fundraisers, as communicators, always be testing to make sure that everything that you're doing is as efficient as possible. So with that, a new year always brings new excitement. And I think many of us probably have some of that excitement, that new year, new excitement left. And then some of us can't believe that we're only, a month and a half into 2018. But either way, try to harness the fact that you do have, it's that, I'm a huge Calvin and Hobbes fan. I have no idea if this is going to resonate with anybody, but there's a really famous, the last Calvin and Hobbes that was ever made, and Hobbes is talking about that fresh sheet of snow, or fresh sheet of snow from the big snowfall the night before. Think about that, a clean sheet of paper that you've got to start over in 2018. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Trey, and he's going to go through the first 3 or so of 10 things that we've got for you all to help in your 2018 fundraising efforts.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabe. And also, I should point out that I, too, am a huge Calvin and Hobbes fan. So even if everyone else missed it, I was all over it, and I reference.
Yes, I have that. I'm just really going down a rabbit hole here, but believe it or not, I have the original print of that last Calvin and Hobbes hanging in my 1-year-old son's room at home. So I do like it a lot. And now I'll let you actually get to the content of the webinar. Go ahead, Trey.
I appreciate it. So the first thing that we want to talk about is now being an awesome time to review your online fundraising tools. So, you're probably right now planning out your events, your different campaigns for the year, which is great. And it's important to not just think about what can you do with these events, but what do you want to do, right? What are your actual needs, not necessarily just the limitations that you currently have. So once you've figured out what you'd like to do, now you have to find the tools that you'll need to execute, right? Are your current tools enough? Do they have features that you may not know about, or perhaps stuff that they've recently launched? Or maybe you need to go out and find some new tools to invest in. Thinking about tools as an investment to help you grow, not necessarily just as a cost of doing business, is a really healthy way to examine these things. The start of the year is a great time to get a level set with your existing partners, and it's also a great time to get demos of things that you may want to add down the line. So bump to that next slide. One of the bigger trends that we're seeing here is nonprofits moving some of their offline efforts online, right? So not necessarily selling tickets or handling event registrations in person through paper and pen, but getting that online. It's way more efficient. All your data is going to be collected in one place. There's less room for manual data errors. And you have an increased share opportunity, right? So use social fundraising to help your supporters spread the word. You're not going to be able to do that unless you're selling these things and promoting online. And just go to that second one now. So this is a huge one for us, and that's thinking mobile first, right? We really, really hope that you guys are already doing this. But if your nonprofit isn't, or your partners and the tools you're using are not thinking mobile first, that's something that we need to start doing, right? We do everything on our phones, and that includes things that nonprofits are focused on, right? Like fundraising campaigns and making donations. So on the next slide, we're going to go through a couple different things, right? But we really just want to talk about what does mobile optimization mean? Basically, it just means making sure that all your content looks great on a phone and a tablet, as well as the laptop or desktop, right? So here's a quick 5 of our mobile-friendly best practices. First one's going to be the hamburger menu. I had no idea what that meant until my marketing team showed me, but it's basically the 3 lines in the top corner on your phone, right? Those slide-out menus are way, way easier to use than any other menu options on a mobile device. Also think about adjusting your content, right? There's less text. And we want to make that larger and a little bit easier to read. And the same thing applies to your buttons. Make sure that people who want to click can click, and those who don't accidentally push it and get the fat thumb syndrome. Remember that less space equals less content. So you're going to have to prioritize when you're thinking about this. Make sure that you're hiding or removing content that isn't going to help the specific action that you're trying to get. And then the last one will be scalable images. Just making sure that your pictures, your videos, graphics, whatever you're showcasing, look good on all different screen sizes. All right, so we're going to bump on to next, and think about what should be mobile optimized, right? The real answer is everything. But I think most people only end up thinking about their website. So we're going to talk about 4 more just to make sure that you kind of have those top of mind and don't forget. Donation and campaign pages that are run by your third parties for events, peer-to-peer or general donation buttons should all be mobile optimized. Think about the emails and donation receipts that your folks are getting, right? It's great that you're communicating with your supporters, but there's a really strong chance that they're going to try and read that on their tablet or on their smartphone first. So we want to make sure it's really, really easy to do that. And then, as we talked about, a great thing for MPOs to be doing is moving their offline things online. But as soon as we do that for an event that requires, either tickets or registration, we need to make sure those pages are also optimized. So we're going to kick to the third thing, which will be meeting potential donors where they are, right? And all that means is get to know who your potential donors are. Where are they spending their time? So checking out websites, different blogs, are they attending events, throughout an area, or maybe subscribing to magazines? Are there connected interests to your cause? What else are your supporters interested in? It's just like real estate, right? We have to focus when we're thinking in terms of marketing about location, location, location. All right, let's bump to the next slide. So once you know where your supporters are, there's a few traditional marketing options that we can start to look at, right? One is simply buying ad space on a select website or blog. Another would be getting an ad or a link to your website or your blog in their newsletter, or even buying an email blast that would be sent to their list. Another really popular one is going to be SEM, which is just search engine marketing, basically, right? That just means using Google AdWords to push people to your fundraising campaigns that are looking for certain keywords. And then the last one we want to talk through is direct mail inserts. So not just sending something to a mailing list, but if a different publication reaches people who may be interested in your cause, see if you can add a flyer or add some content into something that they're already sending and already reaching out with. And then we're going to look at the next slide about some different options, right? So budget is always going to be something we have to consider, right? And so we're going to go through a few non-traditional opportunities that may be a little bit more budget friendly. So take a look at, maybe a really specific blog or website that could be a good location for potential donors, and see if they'll take contributed content, a blog or a new article you write that isn't self-serving, right? So it can't sound like an ad, but it provides interesting content, interesting info to potential readers and connects them to your cause. So some examples of that may be something like a story from your supporter, numbers and stats about the problem, or your ongoing solution efforts. You can also partner with companies that have a similar audience, right? You can do things like host webinars, or you can create downloadable content and get some interesting info from both parties out to their shared audience. And another really, really important thing is make sure all your info that donors can access is up to date. And a great place to start is with GuideStar, right? That information is going out to more than 200 nonprofit partners, so we want to make sure it's up to date and accurate. Speaking of GuideStar, I will let Gabe take over from here.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Trey. And just before we move on from that, something to remind our nonprofit audience of is the Google AdWords grant program. If you are not taking advantage of that, you're leaving about $10,000 a month in AdWords on the table. So just look into that if you haven't already. And if we've got some time at the end of the webinar today, maybe we can dive into that a little bit more. But a great opportunity to do some of that traditional marketing that Trey was talking about. So with that, I want to get into a bit of the shameless plug part of the webinar today. And that's talking to you all about why it's important to update your profiles on GuideStar. And it is a shameless plug, as I said, but we also do think it's really important because we don't like hearing about nonprofits missing out on donations. And far too often I'll be talking to a foundation or I'll be talking to a friend of mine who's donating money to an organization, and they'll find out that I work for GuideStar, and they'll say, oh, I went to look at an organization on GuideStar, but they didn't have the information that I wanted on there, and so I didn't know whether or not to donate. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands the importance of why you should be updating your profiles on GuideStar. So more than likely, you already have a profile on GuideStar, whether you know it or not. It starts from information that we get primarily from IRS Forms 990. And then the idea is that you can come in just like you would personally claim and update your LinkedIn profile. You can claim and update your GuideStar nonprofit profile for your organization. And then you can tell the real true story about your organization. We have more than 9 million users a year just on GuideStar.org. I'm going to talk in a second about where else this information goes. Really importantly, we try to structure our profile so that we're moving beyond overhead ratios, right? 10 years ago, it was all about how many cents on the dollar were going to your mission. And we know that that's important, but that really isn't talking about the results or progress that you're having as an organization. So our new profiles are structured so that you can tell that story with both qualitative and quantitative information about how your organization is making a difference. So as Trey said, when you update your information on GuideStar, it doesn't just live on GuideStar.org. It goes to more than 230 different partners that use that information and share it with their audiences. So you can see there, CrowdRise is one of those organizations. But there's tons of other institutions and organizations that are using that information. Everyone from universities to community foundations to banks. For example, I can donate my credit card points, my Capital One credit card points using a GuideStar interface. Facebook, Amazon Smiles, Google for Nonprofits, that Google Grants program that I talked about. All major U.S. donor-advised funds. Why is that important? If that's just a set of words to you, which I think for a lot of us we're kind of intimidated by the idea of donor-advised funds, just between Vanguard and Fidelity, which are two of our main partners, I think it was $15 billion in giving last year. So grants management software, if you're applying for a grant with a foundation, they're probably going to be seeing your information from GuideStar and a whole host of other organizations and platforms as well. So when you come and update your profile on GuideStar, you've got the opportunity to earn a seal of transparency. And we award 4 different seals of transparency based on the amount of information that you update on your profile. When you get these seals, then you can share them with your audience. You know, so many organizations we will see have this kind of on the bottom of their homepage, if you will, as a little bit of an accreditation, or will put it in print on their flyers that they send out. And we love seeing that. And what each seal real quickly represents, starting from bronze, that's just basic contact information. So people can find you, they can find your organization, they can potentially get donations to your organization as well. Silver is a little bit of financial information just so they can grow to trust you. And then gold and platinum is where it really starts to get interesting. And the gold information is kind of the story behind how your organization is making a difference. What are your goals and strategies? How are you uniquely positioned to help solve your mission? And then platinum is the number behind the results that you're having as an organization. There's new research that comes out all the time, and it's probably the most looked at thing that donors are looking for now, is the number behind how much of a difference that you're making. If you're a homeless shelter, how many beds did you open up? If you're a soup kitchen, how many meals did you serve? If you're an aftercare program, how many students came and took advantage of your services? Those sorts of things. And that would all live in the platinum functionality of your GuideStar nonprofit profile. So with that, here's how you get started. There's 2 different ways. You can just go to GuideStar.org and click on that button up at the top that says Update Nonprofit Profile, or you can just go to GuideStar.org/update. You'll start the process from there. We very quickly just need to claim and make sure you're actually who you say you are with your organization. And then from there, you can start updating. You can get a bronze seal in as little as 15 minutes. You can get all the way to platinum in just a couple of hours if it's information that you already have. So that's it. That's the end of the shameless plug. So we hope that everybody takes advantage of that and updates their profile on GuideStar. With that, I want to dive into a bit why it's important to talk to your supporters differently. You know, years ago, it was easy enough to just send out a blanket message that talked a little bit about your organization, but wasn't broken down on who you're talking to. And now with so many options that all of our audiences have in front of them, you really need to go a step beyond that, and you need to try to talk to that person. And most of us have list sizes that are big enough that you're not actually going to be able to individualize that messaging, but you need to do a good job of kind of faking it the best that you can anyway. And so a couple of ways that you can do that are by audience segmentation And then again, like I said, it's not using the one-size-fits-all messaging. And so let's talk about some different ways that you can do that. And the first is by demographic segmentation. You can see here are 5 of the main ways that marketers and communicators and fundraisers like to break down our different audience groups. And you can think about how the messaging would change depending on if you're talking to baby boomers compared to if you're talking to millennials, say. That's a very different type of message that you'd want to be sending depending on the group that you're talking to. And so you want to think about that. You want to think about how you can get that information on your audience and start to segment those lists and get nice and clean lists so you can speak to them as close to individually as possible. And don't forget that you can do a combination of the two, right? So you can combine different demographic segments to dive even further into your different lists and to speak even kind of closer, get as close as possible to that individual communications as possible. The next is that you can break down your audience by the way that they are interacting with your organization. You know, are they donors? Are they volunteers? Are they the beneficiaries that are using your services? And each of these different types of groups, or are they fundraisers for you even? And each of these different types of groups should really get a different type of message because you have different things that they can help your organization with. Or if it's a case of beneficiaries, you want to make sure that your organization is doing the best job that it can. You want to get, as we call it, as the kind of wonks call it in the sector, that beneficiary feedback. And so you want to make sure that you're talking to them in the right way and getting that information from them. And so you want to think about how has this person interacted with you in the past. And that gets into a little bit of valuation, if you will. And for donors, there's a couple of different categories that you can start to slice people into. And it has to do with kind of how they've given before. Are they a one-time donor? Are they a recurring donor, someone that's giving every month? Or are they a high-wealth donor? And for each of these different categories, and again, you can combine this with different demographics if you want to, and that works for your organization. But you want to think about the value of each of these different donors and what's important to them, right? We want to think about building relationships, particularly when it comes to those recurring and high wealth donors. How can you spend the right amount of time most impactfully with these different types of donors? So you want to think about that as you go through your communications. You want to also think about what's important to these different groups, right? So maybe it's just helpful information on the tax changes in 2018. That's something that all of us as nonprofits should be thinking about communicating to our donors. So that might just be a helpful little article that you see, or maybe the CFO of your organization writes a quick little blog post that you get out to people. Just keep in mind kind of what is going to be important to that different group, that segmented group that you're sending to these different types of individuals. And then lastly, you know, it's all about the data, right? In 2018, oh my gosh, I almost said 2017, but in 2018, if you're not collecting good data and you're not using that to make better decisions, then you're probably leaving money on the table. So why is it important to get that supporter data on the different donations? Well, it starts by helping you build that database and that mailing list. People and people's information is really important to us as organizations. At GuideStar, we deal with about a list of 3 million people or so it's quite a big list that we're dealing with. And so we need to make sure to keep that as clean as possible. Your list probably isn't quite that big, but maybe it is. Maybe it's bigger. But you need to just think about kind of how to get the important different types of data points that you need on your stakeholder list, and then how you can keep that as clean as possible. And that's going to give you that ability, going back to point number 5, to segment as much as possible and to start to have that kind of feeling of personalization in your communications. And then it's also going to give you that data on what works, right? Going back to that 80-20 that I talked about at the beginning, how are you going to know what's most effective if you're not monitoring that data coming in from your different actions as a marketer, as a fundraiser, as a communicator? And then you also are going to want to think about kind of what are those messaging points, or what are the programs even that your donors support the most? What are the things that resonate with them? And again, you're going to kind of layer that on with that testing element of things to make sure that you're having the most impact. So here's some things that you can ask yourself as you start to go through your database. And the first is, are there any gaps in your existing data? Do you need a piece of information on somebody, maybe their geographic location? Maybe it's their role if you're talking to people that are at a business, say. The next thing that you want to ask is, do you have the right tools to collect the right data points? So important in 2018. So much of what we do is based off of our CRMs now. So, you know, are you still using an Excel document as your CRM? Lots of organizations are. Trey is going to talk in just a minute about some opportunities to really maybe move your organization beyond that Excel CRM into something that's a bit more useful maybe for you as an organization. The next thing is who owns your data. As you start to diversify your fundraising platforms, sometimes you're going to run into a situation where you may not actually have all of the information that you need. So that's just something to keep in mind. We love reaching new donors in new places, and one of the sacrifices that we may make is that you may not get to own every piece of information that you'd like about that donor. And that's that, can I take the data with me, right? Do you own it? Can you take it? Can you start to evaluate it and use it for your efforts? So with that, I'm going to toss it back to Trey, but just a couple of little quick things. First, make sure questions, any of them that you have, go ahead and ask right in that questions pane. And just to answer one of the questions that we're getting a lot of, we are going to send out both the recording and the slides of this webinar afterwards. So don't worry, you're going to get that. If you're scrambling to take notes right now, I know I talk way too fast, so sorry about that. But I promise that we're going to send this all out, so you'll have it later. We'll also provide some contact information for Trey, myself, GuideStar, CrowdRise, so that you can reach out to us. So with that, Trey, you want to take it over and talk a little bit about some of the algorithm changes at Facebook?
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Yeah, so we're going to jump in with number 7 and talk a little bit about Facebook, which is kind of beast, you know, in and of itself. It's always a little bit of a puzzle. And then just to make sure everybody's on their toes, they just changed their algorithm again. So, you know, due to some things with fake news and the election, Facebook essentially wanted to change how brand pages, those that are owned by like companies, you know, celebs and nonprofit orgs, are reaching their followers. So Facebook is now focused on making sure that its users are really seeing what they call meaningful social interactions. But what that really means is just they're seeing posts from their friends and family first. So before Facebook even made this change, any post that was made by a brand page would probably reach right around 8% of the audience that was already following their page. So with this new algorithm change, you know, that number is going to go down even further. Individuals are really going to just start seeing, you know, less potential exposure to public content and more exposure to content being shared by individuals. And on the next slide, we'll go through a couple things that you can continue to do. But you know, for those of you that are already actively using Facebook, you should continue to do so. You know, if your posts were working in the past, you can just look to boosting those or maybe promoting them, right? Sometimes for just 25 or 50 bucks, you can push a message out to a couple different groups of people, right? You'll typically have 3 options that you can promote these posts to. One is going to be just your followers. The other one is going to be your followers plus all of their friends. And then you can also pick a custom audience based on segmentation data, right? So kind of the idea that Gabe was talking about a little bit earlier. The other option you can do with Facebook is really start to take advantage of these changes, right? And use social fundraising with your campaigns. So social fundraising is really just getting your supporters to post on their own networks organically. These posts that they're making are going to be reaching an audience that you can't reach without paying, and is going to be at a higher percentage than a brand post that you guys would push out. Engaging in social fundraising is really just all about making sure your campaign pages and your donation flows are optimized to make social sharing super easy and make sure that you're encouraging supporters to actually take that action. And then next one will be number 8, which is really, it should seem obvious, but don't forget to take advantage of your nonprofit status. This is something that everybody on this webinar can really look into pretty quickly. And that's just helping you guys save money so that you can do more with the money you have, right? CrowdRise and our team actually did a whole bunch of research and came up with 20 awesome discounts that already exist for nonprofits. I'm going to go over a few of them right now, but make sure you check out the blog. And as Gabe mentioned, we'll have a follow-up to the webinar, so I'll make sure to include a link to that because all 20 of these are worth checking out. But really quick, I'm going to go on to the next slide, and we'll talk about a couple of these in depth a little bit more. So Gabe mentioned earlier that data is so important, right? We've already kind of talked about that a little bit. And Salesforce is a really great way to get all that data into one place. There are some free accounts available with these guys, but they also promote up to 75% off of their regular prices for nonprofits. We really like Salesforce and think it's genuinely a great option because it integrates with a ton of tools, and that includes CrowdRise. So we're going to move on to the next one that we want to talk about a little bit. We've discussed kind of trying to get your cause where people are already looking, right? One of the places that they're looking is in Google searches. So I think it's good to ask yourself honestly, are you showing up when potential supporters are searching for your name? And then even more, are you showing up when they're just maybe searching for your cause, right? Moz is a really cool tool, and it gives you additional tools and support that will help you improve your SEO ranking and help you show up for those searches. And they do a similar thing with Facebook. It's up to 75% off, so a really, really awesome discount and something you guys can take advantage of. And then on the next slide, we'll go into kind of this last one that we want to dive into, PictoChart. Creating cool content for your webpage or a direct mail piece or social and whatever marketing channels that you're into can be a little difficult, right? We're definitely not all designers, myself included, and that's kind of where PictoChart can come in and help. It's really, really simple, easy to use software, and it lets you create really cool infographics that will engage with your supporters. And these guys have an awesome discount. It goes up to 86% off for nonprofits when they go in. So definitely something worth checking out to help y'all. All right, so we're going to go to the number 9 here. The first 8 that we've talked about have really been focused on the nonprofit itself, right? Number 9 is more for you individuals listening out there. We think it's so important to just take a few moments and remember you are a decent human. You are out there every single day making a difference. So try and take a few moments this year and remind yourself why you're doing what you do, right? We get it. It's really hard not to get stuck on a fundraising goal or whatever number or metric that you're being put up against year over year. So try and make sure you're taking time to celebrate the wins as they come because we know how hard you're fighting. And the last point on this is make sure to have fun. Everybody loses sight of that. And even with my juggling competition, like we still lose sight of that too over here, but we do try and take a few minutes, every day or every week, whatever you can work, and remind yourself to try and have a little fun. And now we're on to the last one, and it's just a reminder that you are not alone. So we're all in this together. Even for those of you, who have to wear a whole bunch of hats or maybe even all of the hats at your nonprofit, there is still support for you. We're all here trying to make this world just a little bit better in our own way. Don't be afraid to share ideas, share best practices with other folks who work at nonprofits. But ultimately, we want to help each other achieve our goals. All right, cool. So we're going to go to the next one, and finally, it'll be a little bit more interactive going forward now. So in the question box on the GoToWebinar, we want you to, in the dropdown, type in your big thing for 2018. So what's one thing that we either talked about on the webinar or didn't talk about, whatever, that your nonprofit is going to test, that they're going to try, that you're going to focus on in 2018? Gabe and myself are going to collect all of these, and we'll share them out anonymously to every individual on this webinar. Don't be shy here, right? The more ideas that we kind of get out there, the more help that we can provide to each other going forward for this year. And I'm going to take a minute. I'm going to pause and give you guys a couple seconds to type some of that in.
Yeah, thanks, Trey. And these responses are flowing in pretty quickly. Thank you, everybody, for not being shy. Certainly, but keep them coming. And I think while we do that, Trey, why don't we talk a little bit about what's going on with our two organizations and one of our big kind of initiatives going into 2018. So for CrowdRise, what do you all have lined up for 2018?
Yeah, so we've actually got a couple of huge changes coming, and I hate to be like cloak and dagger, but those will be rolled out pretty soon here. So I would encourage people to keep checking out our website and stay in contact with us because we've got some new functionality and some new features that we're really, really excited about coming down the pipeline. Not quite ready to share those just yet, but they'll be ready to rock and help people raise money in the very near future. And then,
That's awesome.
Yeah, Gabe, I'd love to hear kind of what you guys are doing at GuideStar.
Yeah, definitely, and very exciting. We'll keep an eye on the CrowdRise site ourselves to learn more about that in the next couple of weeks. A couple of things going on at GuideStar right now. We have our Winter Games campaign going on. So if you're an organization that hasn't updated your profile on GuideStar, it is a great time to do it right now. We have a series of different games that we're running. You can get donations. You can win, randomly selected to win a donation in the range from $100 to $500 just for updating your profile. That's going on for the next couple days or so, so make sure to check that out and so you can learn more about it. Also, we're going to launch our new 2018 seals relatively soon in the next month or so, which will be exciting. We got a question that came in earlier about kind of the freshness of the data. Do we have a way to know how old that information is on a GuideStar profile? And one of the ways that we're starting to communicate that to our users is through seals that have years on them now. So we started that in 2017, and the new 2018 seals will be launching in just the next couple of months. So we're pretty excited about that. So let's take a look at what we've got here, Trey. And I am thoroughly overwhelmed by the amount of responses that we got. So kudos to all of you out there today. We've got some people talking about CRMs. We've got some major gift campaigns, some branding, segmentation, a big first gala. That's great. What are some of the other ones that are standing out to you, Trey?
Yeah, I think these all look good. A lot of stuff about data that I'm seeing, and potential moves to Salesforce and those types of things. And I think anything that you're doing or nonprofits are doing to protect that data and to make sure that they're harnessing it and using that for their marketing efforts is great. So it's good to see those types of questions pouring in.
Yeah, definitely. A couple of people here saying they're focusing on the mobile. That's excellent. I think the stat from CrowdRise is about 2/3 of donations through mobile. GuideStar is getting it up to about 25%, so about a quarter of our traffic now is on mobile, and that's grown exponentially over the last couple of years, I'll note. So also important from that perspective. Anecdotally, I think most of the donations I gave last year were, as a result of some of these disasters that came up, and I felt so implored to give right away that I just pulled out my phone and donated. I think so many of us did that last year, so we need to make sure that we continue that. So I want to dive into a couple of the questions that we've gotten. And again, if you have any more questions, please feel free to put them into the questions pane. We're going to get to as many as we can. There is no way we are getting to all of these, but we do have about 20 minutes, so we'll get to as many as we can. We had a couple of people that are asking about millennials. I am 34, so I'm like a quarter millennial technically, but I guess actually I am a millennial. I don't like to admit it. I don't know about you, Trey, but some questions coming in about kind of the difference in how you communicate to millennials versus Gen X versus baby boomers. John asked a good question about this, and I'll give a little bit of an answer, Trey, and then I'll kick it over to you. But I don't think what I'm about to say is earth-shattering to anyone that's on here, but it's good to keep in mind. There was some great research that was done by I'm blanking on the name of the group, but over the last couple of years about how donors give. And they started doing this research in 2011, and they've been doing it through the last kind of 6 or 7 years. And not surprisingly, one of the things that they found is that millennials like to go online. And we're seeing this across segments now. But we, in particular, are seeing that millennials like to go and do research online before they give. So we know that the giving is taking place online, but not necessarily that that research is taking place online across different generations. But with millennials, I know in 2015, I think it was over 55% were going online to do research before they give. And I'm sorry, that research is money for good. Make a little note to yourself. If you haven't seen it, there's some great research on that. The other thing that's big with millennials, obviously, and this is true for Gen Xers as well, is that they like experiences. How can you combine your mission, your organization, and some sort of an experience, either virtual or in person, to connect with your donors and potential new donors? So Trey, anything to add on that?
No, that sounded really smart, actually. That was a good answer. I think, maybe one thing to add is just really think about like finding the right medium, right? Communicating with a millennial, how they communicate. So maybe that involves some testing and trying things on mobile, that type of deal, but also social fundraising. So millennials like to listen to other people, not just the brand, right? They want to kind of get that vouch from one of their friends or somebody in their social network. So getting your millennial supporters to share and bring in more of their networks, I think is a really, really good strategy.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. Stacy asked a question, kind of going back to one of the things that I talked about, there's all of these different ways that you can slice an onion in terms of our databases and our segments. Trey, do you have any advice on what the best way, the kind of easiest way to segment your database would be?
Yeah, I think, probably the biggest place and maybe the easiest place to start is a fundraiser versus a donor, right? So those two groups need to be talked to in different ways. I think a fundraiser puts in a lot more work than a donor would. So, we need to reflect that in our messaging and show appreciation for that additional work. I think is really, really important. But at the same time, obviously donations are great and we need to make sure that we're maintaining those contacts. So, you have to have a balance of continuing to cater to and thank your existing donors while still nurturing those new relationships, which is why you have to speak differently to these different groups.
Great. Yeah. The one piece of advice that I'd give, and this is something that we do here at GuideStar, we may be a kind of a unique little snowflake here, but it's to start to think of your audience in terms of personas, right? So maybe you think about your donors from the perspective of kind of how they give and start to think about what are going to be those triggers that actually make them give. Are they the types of donors that, routinely are doing those donations just like so many people at the end of the year? Or are they the donors that are giving a recurring gift every single month? What are going to be the things that kind of nudge them toward giving more routinely? And that actually leads me to a question from Kendra, which is how can we start to convert those one-time donors to more recurring donors? Trey, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, from there, it's really just about educating them about the cause and making sure that they have all of the tools to engage with your cause, right? So a lot of people are going to want to maybe make that one-time donation and maybe they want to set up a fundraiser, but if you don't have the tools in place to allow for that, very rarely are they going to go and actively seek that out on their own, right? We just need to lower the cost to entry, right? We need to kind of give them the path of least resistance to sign up for a recurring donation or to set up a fundraiser. And I think when you couple that with a good education and a good marketing reach out, that's when you can really start to convert some of those one-time donors.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And, again, I'll give like a little bit of an anecdote from my life. And I donate to the local NPR station here in Washington, D.C., and I had kind of done it just kind of sporadically going through, but they started to send me a weekly newsletter that I really liked, and it was very community focused. I was impressed with kind of how much they were able to provide content that was relevant to me and the communities that I live in, and that was really the thing that pushed me over the edge to become a monthly recurring donor. So think about how you can kind of provide that value as well. Kelly asked a question here about kind of, is this USA or is it worldwide? And I'll go ahead and answer that from a GuideStar perspective, and then Trey, maybe you can answer it from CrowdRise perspective. But GuideStar currently is only populated with organizations that are U.S.-based nonprofit organizations. And so, unfortunately, if you're an international NGO that's not based here, doesn't have a headquarters here in the United States, we're not going to be able to help. But I will say that our audience is very international. We have users coming to look at the information from all over the world constantly. And so really our audience reaches out to a much more international audience. Trey, how about CrowdRise?
Yeah, pretty similar. Definitely, U.S.-based 501c3s are our audience, but we can also use or support nonprofits based in Canada. And then I think just like we still have kind of a worldwide audience, so we can take donations from anywhere, but that money ultimately needs to funnel back to a nonprofit based in the U.S. or Canada.
Yeah, great. Makes perfect sense. I mentioned the Google Grants program earlier, and we had a couple of questions just about clarifications on that and how to find more information. So you just go to google.com/grants, and you're going to find the information that you need there. But basically, the broad brush strokes on it are, if you're a U.S.-based charity, then you can get up to $10,000 a month in free AdWords. You have to go through an application process and that sort of thing. And then there's certain rules that you have to work by. But it's really a fantastic program that all of our audiences out there, as long as you're a nonprofit organization, should be taking advantage of. So again, google.com/grants. We've had some kind of clarifying questions come in about GuideStar nonprofit profiles and how to update and that sort of thing. So I'm just going to try to kind of go through some of those as quickly as possible. And then we'll get on to some of the other questions. So first question, is it free to update your profile on GuideStar? Absolutely. It is always free for the nonprofit to update their profile on GuideStar. There's no charge for that. We have tons of resources online to help you with that process. We have a whole page dedicated to different resources to make it as easy as possible for organizations to update their profile. All of that can be found at guidestar.org/update. Or you can email our support team at support@guidestar.org. There was some questions here coming in just about how much time it takes to update your profile. To get all the way up to platinum, I'd say you can do it in kind of an hour and a half, 2 hours if you've got that information handy. If not, it might take you a little bit longer than that. Another question came in about some of the benefits of updating. 2 quick benefits. Really tangible benefits. We know that organizations that have that gold and platinum seal of transparency are going to get more donations right there on GuideStar. When you go to update your profile, you can turn on that donation functionality, another benefit. And then if you get to that gold or platinum level, you're going to increase your donations. You're going to also increase the amount of views that you get on your profile. We weight our search engines based on if you have one of those higher seals of transparency. So donors are much more likely to see that information about your organization. So hopefully I kind of got some of those off pretty quickly. We have another question that came in here, unrelated, from Leandra. And she's kind of asking about, getting a grant is so competitive. It's a really hard thing to do. Even getting donations these days, there's so many nonprofit organizations out there. How can you help your organization stand out from the pack? And I'll give a quick answer on this, and then Trey, you can take a shot at it afterwards. But one of the things that I say to nonprofits is to think about how you can communicate how you're able to make a difference in a way that is unique to your organization, that no other organization is able to do. What are the things that make you uniquely positioned to solve your mission? And how can you communicate that as kind of easily and succinctly as possible to potential donors out there? So that's kind of the typical answer that I give. Trey, how about you? What's your advice there in helping organizations stand out from the pack?
Yeah, that's great. I don't know that I have anything crazy specific for the grants, but I think anytime you have the opportunity to use your supporters' stories, that's a great opportunity, right? I mean, the passion that they have for your organization it's just going to speak way louder than you'll ever be able to, right? Telling that genuine, compelling story, if you can work that in, I think that'll definitely give a leg up.
Great. We had a question that came in about CrowdRise and GoFundMe merging last year. I know that was a big story kind of in the middle of the year. Trey, can you talk a little bit about that and kind of how that impacts nonprofits?
Yeah, so that happened almost a year ago exactly now, and it's been absolutely awesome for us. They've really helped us grow in terms of what kind of functionality we're able to offer, different support levels, that kind of thing. So it's been an awesome thing for us and our nonprofit partners. Simultaneous while they're helping us grow, we're still kind of, we're all part of one big family, but we really do have separate roles, right? GoFundMe is still the best in the world at helping people who are giving directly to an individual, right? Medical bills, expenses, a house burned down, things like that. Whereas CrowdRise is really just more now the nonprofit version of that. So we still, we only work with 501c3s and nonprofit organizations. But GoFundMe has been a great, great partner and continues to kind of help us grow basically every single day.
Great. Greg has a question about how often it's appropriate to run a social fundraising campaign, and he points out that donor fatigue really is an issue, and that's certainly something that we hear from GuideStar's side of things. Trey, any general advice on kind of how much is too much?
Yeah, I think, it kind of depends on how you're talking about it, but when you look at it from the social fundraising aspect, right? So that just means your supporters sharing that. It isn't really campaign based, right? So there's not going to be a certain number on it. And I would say the more the merrier if it's coming organically, right? So if we're giving your fundraisers, your donors the opportunity to share, I don't know that there is a fatigue level for that because it's genuine and it's organic and it doesn't feel forced, if you will. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I think that that's right. And I just think something to keep in mind, kind of maybe tangential to that, is making sure that you're keeping really clean email lists too. Spam traps and spam filters are getting more advanced. And so I think it's important that if you're not seeing interaction from some of the email addresses that you have on your list, go ahead and keep those lists as clean as possible, because that can hurt you then in your deliverability across the rest of your list. So you want to be as kind of careful with that as possible. We have a question here from Michelle about suggested content management software, and I'll answer from GuideStar's perspective. We use a CMS that's called HubSpot. They also have a great program for nonprofits. There's kind of a free product and then a discount as well if you use kind of their more premium software. We're pretty happy with the different functionality that you can get from that. Trey, I'm not sure if you know anything about the content management system that CrowdRise uses.
Yeah, I can tell you we actually also use HubSpot and we love it. So that's definitely a great one to start with. WordPress is pretty basic, but it is inexpensive and there are a lot of different add-ons. So depending on what you're looking for, those are good places to start.
Yeah, great. And just to connect the dots on a couple of different things that we've talked about earlier, when you're looking at that, whether it's WordPress or there's 100 of them out there now that will help you build a website and will manage your web presence. But make sure that you're looking for a solution that really has mobile optimization at the front of things. As Trey said, so much of what everyone is doing online these days is based on what they're doing on their cell phone. So make sure that the platform that you're looking for is mobile optimized primarily. So Alexa has a question here about how we go about getting more information from folks we already have in our system. So if you just have that kind of baseline of information, how can you go about getting more in-depth information about your contacts? Trey, any advice on that one?
Yeah, so I think updating their profiles and reaching out, and when somebody comes through CrowdRise, we also have the ability to capture customized data through their donation flow. So when they come in, if you want to grab a phone number or want them to give you a quick sentence on why are they supporting your cause, anything like that, we do have the ability to add those customized questions, whether they're setting up a fundraiser or making a donation, so that you can start to get a little bit more specific with your supporters and your cause. And I think, sending an email that isn't just for a donation is also a really easy way to do that, right? I think we send a lot of ask emails out there, but on the next one you guys kick out, in addition to some new content and that kind of thing, I think we can have them, update their profile or whatever the specific solution is for your nonprofit.
Yeah, and it can be a really challenging problem. I think, Trey, you were starting to get to this, but there's a really fine line of asking your stakeholders, if you will, for kind of more information about them, and then kind of coming across as creepy too, asking for too much information. So if you're going to go that route, read some kind of best practices online about list segmentation and kind of how you would go about soliciting that information potentially from your existing database. And just make sure if you're doing that to make the case as to why you're doing it and why it's important. You know, tell them that the reason that you're doing it is because you want to make sure that you're not sending them information and content that's not really informative to them and doesn't make sense to them. So that's just something to keep in mind if you are going to go through that process. We have Yvonne here has a question that I like a little. Well, she's got more of a comment, but I think that it's kind of a good guideline as to how often to be contacting different people. And she says we don't like to bother our donors more often than necessary for gifts. We keep our Facebook page updated at least weekly, but limit emails to quarterly and hard emails to 2 to 3 times per year. Also, we don't have any way to determine the age of the people on our mailing list and know whether or not they're older and wealthier donors give through hard paper mailing. And that's a great last point. You know, going back to that comment about the different generations, snail mail still works. And we know that it works particularly with baby boomers and with kind of older generations. So make sure that, you know, even as, you know, maybe if you're a millennial yourself, you know, don't just think that the friends that you surrounded yourself with are the only ways to get money. There's still other techniques that you can manage and that you can optimize to increase donations as much as possible. So we are getting pretty close to time. Trey, I just want to give you a minute here for any last thoughts that you have before we wrap things up.
No, I'm great. I just want to say a quick thank you to those of you who sat here, and I hope my part wasn't boring, and I know Gabe's was better, but yeah, that was fun, and I really appreciate everybody kind of joining in and listening, and hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, and Trey, I think you're beating yourself up a little bit too much. I think you did a great job. But seriously, thank you everybody for hanging out with us a bit today. Particularly, as I said, if you're on the East Coast, I'm going to go work on our rooftop right now myself. So I hope everybody else can do the same thing. But again, just a couple quick follow-up things. We're going to be sending out an email tomorrow. It's going to have the slides. It's going to have the recording. We also put together a great little 2018 checklist. And then we're going to compile that list of 2018 initiatives, and we'll send that out to you so you can see what your peers are up to as well. Lastly, most important, we'll make sure that we have contact information for our 2 organizations. If you have any questions on how CrowdRise or GuideStar can help you, we'll make sure that you can get in touch with us. So again, thanks so much, everybody, and good luck in the rest of your 2018.